Hello and welcome to another edition of Sun Dragon Tips and Tricks. I'm Rebecca. I'm the owner of Sun Dragon Art and Fiber in downtown Brevard, North Carolina, and I'm filming from my house today. I'm trying to get out a video before I go on a small vacation, a small break, about doing pressed flowers or doing garter mosaic in general, but doing it in the round. So I am doing my cardigan right now, which is knit flat, as is this is a pattern by Amy Christoffers, by the way. Buy the pattern. This will not tell you how to do it without the pattern. She put a lot of work into these patterns. I'm doing the cardigan, and the body of the cardigan, the cowl, and the shawl are all knit flat. It's garter mosaic, but it is knit flat. And garter is the effect you get when you knit every row on a flat piece like this. So we get the texture in between the flowers. We get all these bumps, all of these bumps in here. Now the flowers are a little bit different. They are what we would call stockinette, where you knit on the right side and you purl on the wrong side of the work. And I have done other videos that talk about how to read the charts and how to do those basic stitches if you are knitting flat. Now the sleeves of the cardigan, and I'm not ready for the sleeves. I've got front panels, but I don't have the back done in order to do the sleeves. The sleeves and the hat and the new pullover that she's published have the same effect, but you are knitting in a circle. You're knitting in the round. And when you're knitting in the round, the biggest difference is when you're knitting flat, the wrong side of the work faces you for one row and the right side of the work faces you for the next row, and you keep flipping. And so you read the charts and follow the directions the way all my other videos have been telling you to do if you're flipping your work around so that the wrong side faces you. Now, when you're doing it in a circle, when you're doing it in the round, the right side is always facing you. So you need to do a different stitch to create the same effect. So we're going to go over that today. I realized that, let me see if I can find it. It was going to be a while until I got to the sleeves. I was originally intending to show you all this technique on the sleeves of my cardigan. It's going to be a while before I get there because I have so many projects going. So I have started a little sample here, which I will use to show y'all a version, not the same one that's in the pattern, because I've made my own chart up that uses some elements of pressed flowers, but you still need to get the pressed flowers patterns to understand stitch counts and the right repetition to do everything correctly. I'm just going to show you a demonstration of how to read her charts if you're going in the round, and how it really is based on the idea that knit and purl stitches are the reverse of each other. So when you have the right side of the work facing, you need to do the reverse of what you would have done with the wrong side facing, which can sound complicated, but it's not, especially if you're using the charts and following the instructions. So let's get to it. All right, so here's some visual words that are going over things that I was just talking about. And we're talking about getting this kind of texture, which is very bumpy all around the flowers. It is a slip stitch texture. How to get this texture and these pieces I made flat, how to get that same texture in the round. So vocabulary, what I was just talking about in the starter piece. Garter is the texture that's produced when you knit every row when knitting flat. So on the right side and the wrong sides, you're knitting on every side. What happens is you're going to get stacked rows of the front side and the back side of knit stitches. So the front side of knit stitches tend to look like little V's. And the back side of knit stitches, there's V's embedded in them, but the back side, what you tend to see the most of are these bumps. They kind of look like they're stacked. They're alternating. You've got like high rows and low rows of bumps, but you've got these interwoven row of bumps. The back side of a knit stitch looks like those bumps. And then another row of knitting looks like little V's on top of that. I often call the V's valleys and the bumps the mountains because the bumps tend to look like they're much closer to you. And then if you knit again, when you're turning the work around, you'll end up with this stack of bumps again. That's garter. And it's one of the easiest, most fun things to do when you're just learning to knit because all you need to know is one stitch. Now, here's the thing. So these stacked rows of front side and back side of knit stitches. When you're knitting in the round, you're never flipping the work. You always have the right side of the work facing you. Only the right side is facing the knitter. You're never flipping the work around. In order to create the same effect, you need to do something different on those bump parts. The bumps are at the back side of a knit stitch. They're also the front side of a purl stitch. So to get this same effect, if we want to call these, say row 1, 2, 3, and 4, when we're knitting flat, this would be, you're knitting every row. When you're knitting in the round, the way you get the same effect is you knit the first row, and then to get the back side of a knit stitch on the front, if you're not turning the work around, you need to purl that row. And then you're going to knit a row, and then you purl. To get that same garter effect in the round, you actually do need to do something a little more complicated when you're working in the round. So to come back over to my overview here, the rows that would be knit on the wrong side need to be purled on the right side for the same effect. They need to be purled on the right side, and that's what we did right there. And the extra special step down here for garter mosaic, it's the same in the round as flat. It's each color of yarn gets 2 rows before you switch colors. Now, when you're working flat, that is much easier to remember because you're going over and back with one color and then over and back with the next color. When you're going in a circle, it's harder to remember, for me, to get those 2 rows done. So it helps me to know I'm going to be doing a majority knit row and a majority purl row before I switch. Not to forget that purl row before you switch colors. And I will show you on the sample that I have how that can be sometimes overlooked or sometimes missed, and something to look out for as you're going to make sure you've done both rows. So let's take a look at my chart here that I've made, and I have a whole separate video on reading charts. So if you are doing charts for the first time and going, what the heck is going on here? I'm going to review a few things, but I have a separate video for charts, and especially charts with garter mosaic. I will say they were for garter mosaic flat. So I'm not going to break down everything here. I'm just going to review a few things. Charts, as a reminder, are what your piece will look like from the front, from the right side, from the outside. And each box is a stitch, and each box will have 2 things in it for this mosaic. There will be symbols and there will be colors. So let's mark that. We have 2 things to pay attention to in each box. We have the color. For this video, I have no color and I have orange for the contrast. So main color there's no color in the box. Contrast color, there's orange in the box. And then there's the symbol that's in the box, which tells you what to do. Those are the 2 things to pay attention to. What is the symbol in the box and what is the color of the box? The other thing to remind you of is charts go from right to left. I have the numbers here. This is a 10 stitch repeat that I'm about to do with my sample. And they also go from bottom to top. And while that may feel weird, what I always like to remind people is this is our first row. And as we work up, what is hanging under the needle will look just like what is under the row we're on the chart. We'll see how that plays out as we go. So again, to get this kind of effect, when we're knitting in a circle, different rows will do different things. And this, my other chart would talk about right side and wrong side and what you do with those. When you're knitting in the round, you are always on the right side. You're always moving in the same direction, that means, because you're going in a circle. So sometimes the charts are a little less complicated. But to produce an effect that happens when you knit every row flat, it is a little more complicated to do that in the round. So I will show y'all here on this one. I have done row 1 already. I have a little bit of ribbing underneath here, but if you look under my needle, you might have to look really, really close. I have all V's underneath. I talk about V's and bumps. I have all V's underneath my needle. I've already done row 1, which has no color in it, so it is my main color. And there are no symbols in it, which means I knit. Row 2, there's no color, so it means it's my main color, but there are these dots in there, and dot means purl. If, and let me get to the beginning of the row here. There's my stitch marker. If I was turning around and knitting flat, the wrong side, bumps on the wrong side can mean knit. But again, we're going to try to forget that for right now. If you're doing the hat, you never have to worry about flat stuff. If you're doing the cardigan, you're doing flat for some and in the round for others. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to purl this row. And I will have the same bumps under here that are the bumps of some of the rows on this. See that texture right in there? Those bumps. Right now in the round, I'm going to make them by purling. So I will join you at the end of this row, of row 2. All right, I'm approaching the end of the row here. Again, it was a pretty, row 2 was a pretty easy row. It's just purling all the way around. I'm about to add in my contrast color though. And let's see, got to the end of my round. All these purl bumps underneath. I call them turtlenecks. They're right up close to the loops that are on the needle. Now, I find it's helpful to mark whatever row you're on by putting something above the row you're on so you can see how it stacks over the row you just did. Not much is happening yet, but this one might help later on. So row 3, we have, let's just look at the very first stitch. We have, it's the contrast color, it's the orange, but there's no symbol. Remember, there's 2 things to pay attention to. There's no symbol in it, so it's a knit stitch, but it is orange, so it is the contrast color. So I'm going to get my contrast color in here, and I will go ahead and knit that stitch. I'm holding the tail to the back side of my work, and I'm going in and I'm going to knit that first stitch. Now let's look again. Let's look down here. I'm going to slip the next stitch, and all slipping, if it's not a decrease, we're going to do purlwise. We're going to do in a direction that doesn't twist the stitch. And I can look ahead and see that I'm going to knit, slip, knit, slip, knit, slip, knit. I'm basically going to repeat this the whole way around. So I'm going to knit, I'm going to make sure it's not with my tail. Knit with my contrast and slip, knit, and slip. Remember, slipping is like you stick your needle in like it's a purl stitch, but then I'm going to knit. I'm just letting the yarn go behind these slip stitches. Slip, knit, slip. I'm going to do that all the way around, getting some of my yarn here. I'm going to make sure, I can always look back every once in a while and make sure I have alternating stitches of my contrast color and my slip stitch. So slip, knit, slip, knit. Remember, that's the row I'm on. If I ever lose track, I can say, did I just knit or slip? I want to do the other thing. I'm going to do this all the way around. And I will join you at the end of this row. All right, I'm nearing the end of my row here. Got my last knit and my last slip. Here's my row marker. So now I'm on row 4. Let's take a look at this before we do it. A couple of things to notice is that this is my second row with my contrast color. Remember I was saying before. And if we look at this, it's hard to tell because we have all the main color bumps here, but we don't have any bumps. We don't have any purl stitches with our contrast color. That's how one way to know we haven't done this row yet. Because if we look at the symbols here on row 4, we have contrast color. There's a dot in it. That means we need to purl. And then we have a slip stitch. And then we have a contrast color, purl, and a slip stitch. Another thing just to visually see here is our purl stitches are stacked over the ones that we knit last time. So this first stitch, if I can, I'll try to do it off to the side so we can still see the chart. So I got to bring my yarn to the front to purl. And this is loose because my tail isn't tied in yet. But then I'm going to slip a stitch, and this is same rules as when we were doing this flat. We are always slipping with the yarn on the wrong side. If we slipped with the yarn in front, then we would have a strand of our contrast color in front of this main color. We don't want that. So we got to bring the yarn to the back to slip. That was this one here. We got to purl again, so we have to bring it to the front. There's a lot of back and forth, which if anyone has done the mosaic garter flat, that was also the case. There was a lot of back and forth. So front to purl, back to slip. There's just a lot more purling in this version. Flat garter mosaic is a lot of knitting. In the round garter mosaic, every other row, the majority of the stitches are purled. So this row is slip. Let's start with a purl, yarn to the back to slip. We're still slipping purlwise. Slipping purlwise has nothing to do with where the yarn is. The yarn's in the back. That's kind of a knit thing. It has everything to do with just how you're sticking your needle in. We want the yarn in the back. We want the yarn on the wrong side of the work. So it's not shown. It doesn't cross in front of your slip stitches. So front to purl, back to slip, front to purl, back to slip. So you're moving in between every stitch here. Slip with your yarn in back, purl with your yarn in front. So this row may take you some time. I'll meet you at the end of this row, but I'm moving the yarn between every stitch. And I am purling the stitch of the same color as what I'm holding, and I'm slipping the stitch of the other color. That's ways to keep on track. With your second row, you're working the stitches that are the same color, and you're slipping the stitches that are the other color. If you look at what I'm doing though, I now have purl bumps. I now have those garter bumps, whatever we want to call them, of the color I'm holding in my hand. That's how I know I'm doing my second row. Sometimes I like to call these the setup row and the set row. This is the set row. The pattern has already been established, and I am now adding my garter bumps on top of what's already been established. Slip with yarn in back, purl with yarn in front. This is the biggest change from garter mosaic flat. Everything's the same. We have the set row, we're slipping the stitches of the other color, and we're working the stitches of the same color we're holding, but doing it in the round, to get those bumps on the right side, we need to purl. Forward, oop, lost my stitch there, purl, back to slip, forward to purl, back to slip. You do this at your own speed, take your time. I just want to show you before the video gets too long, so I'm working my way around here. Forward to purl, back to slip, forward to purl, back to slip. You always want to slip stitches with your yarn on the wrong side, which if we're going in a circle, the wrong side will always be in back. I'm coming up on my stitch marker here. So this is essentially the plain stitch that we talked about in one of the other videos. It's just knitting and slipping one, and on the second row though, to get the same effect, we need to purl one and slip one. Beginning of my row here. If I move to row 5, no color, no symbol, knitting with the main color. So I'm going to go to the back here. I like to take the old over the new, so I'm going to take my contrast color over the top and pick up my main color from underneath. That's what it'll look like. And I'm just going to go ahead and knit around. This is going to set up those knit and or purled and slip stitches as little boxes, just like this, although it looks more spread out in the chart because garter squishes things down. Let me just get across this and I'll meet you at the other side for row 6. All right, I am coming up on the end of the row. And just like the chart, all my stitches are my main color and they're all knit. Let's see what I do on row 6. No color in them, so it's the main color. And a dot, so I'm going to purl. Bring my yarn to the front. And I'm going to purl. If I lose track of where I am, if I pull down on here, there's no purl bumps here. We've got to get a purl row in before we switch colors. So if you ever get to a row and you're like, I don't know if it's my second row or my first row with this color, do we see any purl bumps? There's going to be some purl bumps. Like this row, they're all purled. If you take a look back, I've got all these purl bumps there. I'm going to finish this row and I'll see you at the end. All right, I'm coming up on the end of my row here. It's my second row. It's my set row. I know there wasn't much going on with it, but this is my set row with the main color. So move it to the back, slide my stitch marker. And here is where I run into something a little different than what I did for the plain stitch row. And if I can, I'm going to put in stitch markers. I highly recommend. I don't know if I'm not prepared. I don't know if I have enough stitch markers here. I might have some of these dangly ones. I might use them. Might use a whole bunch of different ones. We'll see. I have a 10 stitch repeat. I am going to switch colors because the very first square here kind of tells me what I'm doing. I have contrast color and I'm knitting. So I'm going to take my main color. We're looking at it from the top. I'm going to take that over to the left, and I'm going to pick up my contrast color under from the right, just to twist them to give it a little bit less likelihood of a hole. And let's see what this is telling me to do. It tells me to knit one and then slip one. Remember, we slip purlwise with the yarn in the back side. And then I'm going to knit another. No symbol means knit, even though it's a different color. I'm going to slip again, and then I'm going to knit 3 in a row, slip 1, knit 1, slip 1. Now I go back to the beginning of the repeat. In some of these charts, the repeat is outlined and there's stitches on the outside edge. They're not part of the repeat. You do them when you're done. This, just for ease of showing you all, I'm going to put a stitch marker on here. I'm going to go back to the beginning, knit 1, slip 1, knit 1, slip 1, knit 3, slip 1, knit 1, and slip 1. I can put another stitch marker in if I want to mark these repeats. Now this is not the same repeat. It has some of the same elements, but is not the same repeat as what is in the pressed flowers pattern. So if you are following the pressed flowers pattern, do what it says on the chart for this rather than what I'm doing. I'm just doing this for demonstration of the technique. So I'm going to keep following this pattern all the way around. This is my knit row, and it's every 10 stitches. If I need to, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, I can count and make sure that it is going correctly. But I'm going to do this pattern all the way across. I don't expect you to go as fast as I am. I cast on 100 stitches just for this sample. I may have to cobble together all kinds of funny looking stitch markers to go all the way around this. But I'm doing my set row. Knit 1, slip 1, knit 1, slip 1, knit 3. And I'll meet you at the other end so we can talk about what the next row is. I think I'm on my last repeat here of my set row. Knit 1, slip 1, knit 1, slip 1, knit 3, knit 1, slip, that slip 1, knit 1, slip 1. Ah, my words are going to get all wonky. All right, so if I didn't have my marker here to know, I've got other things going on there. If I was like, did I do row 8 or did I not? Let's look. Row 8 is our set row. We just did our establishment row. Row 8 is the one that keeps it in place. It has purl stitches in it. I see purl stitches in the white, but not in the orange. So I haven't done this row yet. But this is when there's a dot in it, we're going to purl. When there's an S, we're going to slip. When there's no dot, look, that row is different than what happened on row 4. So let's do it one stitch at a time. And remember, we slip with yarn in back on the wrong side. So I'm going to purl the first stitch. Got to move my yarn to the back to slip. I'm going to purl that third stitch, move my yarn to the back to slip. I'm going to knit these, not to be confused to what happens when we're doing it flat, but there's no symbol in them, so I'm just going to go ahead and knit them. Knit the 3 that are all together. slip, that's a purl bump. Yarn to the back every time we slip. So dangly stitch markers like this, I'm going to move to the front so they don't get caught, but I'm going to purl. I'm back here again, I'm going across again. Move to the yarn to the back to slip, front to purl, back to slip. Now, I have 3 in a row with no symbols in them, so just orange, so I'm going to knit them. Yarn's already in back for the next slip, which is great. Move the yarn to purl, move it back to slip. Slip my marker, I'm going to go back here again. Purl, move to the back to slip, move the yarn to the front to purl, move it to the back to slip. 3 stitches in a row, no symbol in them, so I'm going to knit them. So I'm going to continue this repeat all the way across, and it's when there's single stitches of the color I'm holding, I'm purling them, I'm slipping with yarn in back, and when it's multiple stitches of the yarn I'm holding, I'm knitting. If the rhythm of that is at all confusing, just keep following the chart. Keep following the chart. And do what it says to do every single time. For some people, the patterns will work and stick in your head. And for other people, just follow the chart. It's okay. Everybody's brains work differently. Follow the chart, count your numbers. I'll finish this row and see you at the end. Here's my last repeat. My single stitches, I'm following the chart, but my single stitches are getting purled. My multiple stitches are knit. In all of my other color, the stitches are getting slipped with yarn in back. All right. And even though I've got some knit stitches where there's multiples, where I see my single stitches, I can see my turtlenecks, my purl bumps. So I know I've completed my second row with the contrast color. Now I've included 2 more rows just to show you what happens when we have to slip stitches and we're using our main color. So again, I'm going to take the yarn I just finished with, I'm going to take it over to the left on top, and I'm going to find my main color and bring it up underneath from the right. And let's see what it's telling me to do. No color means main color. No symbol means knit. I'm going to knit 4. And I'm going to slip 3 that happen to be the 3 in a row of my contrast color. And I'm going to knit 3 more. Takes me up to my stitch marker. Can move my stitch marker. Like to leave it hanging in front so it doesn't get tangled with the yarn. I'm going to knit 4, which is going to take me right up to those 3 stitches of the other color, and I'm going to slip them. Slip purlwise with yarn in back. I'm going to knit 3 more. Now in this row, it's important to note you will not be slipping stitches of the same color on your setup row here. My 4 stitches bring me right up. I might be knitting some stitches of the other color because I'm establishing a new pattern, but I should not be slipping stitches of the same color I'm holding. That doesn't tend to happen in mosaic. You're always slipping stitches. You're not slipping all the stitches of the other color, but the stitches that you are slipping should be the other color on both rows. The color you're holding in your hand, you're establishing more of. You don't need to slip them. So I'm following the pattern that is underneath me here, all the way around. And these stitch markers help me stay on track. Knitting my 4, slipping my 3 in a row that are 3 of my contrast color, and knitting my 3. I'll meet you at the end of the row to see what we do next. At my last repeat here, doing my 4, slipping my 3, and knitting my 3 takes me to my end of row marker. It's often important to have a different color or style or something here so you can tell your beginning of row marker apart from the others. Let's see what's going on with this last row that I have on my chart. I'm purling the ones I knit last time. I'm slipping the same 3 and I'm purling the ones I knit last time. Again, every row of garter mosaic in the round will have a knit row and a purl row before you switch colors. And if I look right underneath the needle here, I don't see any purl bumps in my main color yet, so I know I haven't done this row yet. So I'm going to purl my 4. I'm going to slip these. Remember, yarn needs to be in back. This second row has a lot of movement to it because you purl with the yarn in front and you slip with the yarn in back. The yarn needs to go behind these stitches, otherwise we've ruined the whole effect. We've undone all the work we've done. So I'm bringing my yarn to the front again. I'm going to purl those last 3 stitches before the marker. I'm going to slip my marker. And this time I'm going to want the marker hanging back behind so it doesn't tangle with this. And I'm going to purl my next 4. Move the yarn to the back, slip the 3 of the other color, yarn to the front, purl 3. For some people, if they're feeling comfortable with it, we are purling the stitches of the same color, and we're slipping the stitches when we get there. Get my little tassel guy out of the way, of the other color. When in doubt, look at your chart and see what's happening. If I see a main color stitch on this row, I'm going to purl it. Move my marker. Oop. If I see a contrast color, move my yarn to the back and slip them. When in doubt, read your chart. I'm going to finish up this row, and I'll see you at the other end. Here's my last repeat, purling the stitches of my main color, slipping with yarn in back, my contrast, and purling my last few stitches. There is that garter mosaic effect, but I was knitting in the round. And I can tell I've done my row 10 because I have purl bumps in my main color here. So this is what that chart looks like. What's hanging underneath are all the rows. Those bumps, those dots look like bumps on what I've knit. If I grab a bit of the one that is done flat, you can see the texture looks very similar. So thanks for joining us today on how to do this technique, which was knit flat. how to make it happen in the round and the differences that will happen when you're following the chart when you're doing it in the round. Things I would like to reiterate that you keep in mind is your second row, which would have been knit if you were flat, will be purled if you're in the round for a garter effect. So make sure that you're always using each yarn for 2 rows, a knit row and a purl row, no matter what's being slipped. And always slip your stitches with your yarn on the back side, which on your set row, your second row of each color, will mean a lot of moving back and forth. I hope you have fun. These videos are the best if you're doing pressed flowers, are going to be the most helpful for the hat, for the sleeves of the cardigan, and for the pullover, which is done top down in the round. I have not done that one yet. That's the only one I haven't done yet, and I may not get to it because I have so many other things going on. But I hope this helps. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to this channel. It is free to do so. Our numbers are growing by leaps and bounds every day. It's wonderful. If you'd like to give this a tip, you can give a super thanks, or you can become a member. That is a monthly donation. Every little bit helps all the work we do to put into these videos. I'm pretty much a team of one doing all of this stuff, so we appreciate that. I'm looking into what I can do to expand access. These videos will never go away. We will always be having these YouTube tips and tricks that will be free. We're looking at what ways we can expand access to me by some kind of monthly membership levels where you could have access to like group live sessions, things like that. I'm taking a poll to figure out what we might do for that. If we want to have things that are specifically knit along related, seminars, things like that. Like I said, these will never go away, but I'm trying to figure out ways to monetize one-on-one or class access to me. And that all depends on if I have the time and energy to be able to do it. So lots of ifs on that, but we appreciate everything you do. If you give this a thumbs up or a comment, whatever you're able to do is really great. So as I always like to say, may your crafting be filled with joy and confidence. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.